Are we live? Come on, YouTube. We are live! Ladies, gentlemen, and cyborgs, how's it going? I'm Zach Friedman. Welcome to the Hack Chat. I'm not late, I am right on time. It is such an honor and a pleasure to be on this. I'm not sure how many folks know this, but Hackaday... Huh? It's on a lag. I'm not sure how. I'm not sure how many folks know this, but Hackaday is the reason why I got into building stuff in the first place. Like I wasn't even aware that like there were hobbyists that built things until I saw this project for building a heads-up display on Hackaday, and this was like the days of Google Reader. So like I immediately like subscribed to everything hack related I can find, and that got me well. Like that kind of got me where I am today. This heads-up display is kind of the culmination of that, and I guess I would say that the fact that I even have this channel at all, kind of is directly related to that. Anyways, you came here to find out about finishing projects, and a long time ago, like back when I first got started doing this, I was really bad at finishing projects. I didn't like. I went to engineering school, but I didn't really pass any of my engineering classes. So I was pretty much all self-taught, so I just kept jumping into situations over and over again where I had no idea what I was getting into, and most of those projects were abandoned or I would just move on. And it really did take years and years for me to get to a point where I was actually finishing most of what I started. I would argue that it wasn't even until I got serious about YouTube that I got into that mindset of everything I start must be finished quickly. So it is such an honor to be here on the other end of that. I kind of feel like I've made it, you know? Anyways, you guys came with questions. I'm ready for answers. If you are watching this on YouTube, be aware that I'm going to be answering most of the questions on Hackaday.io. So check the pinned comment for that. If you're watching this on Hackaday.io, you are not hearing a word I'm saying right now, but, you know, I'm not answering there, I'm answering here. If you're watching this later, hello, future. I hope it's as good as I want it to be. So, without further ado, let's get chatting about finishing your projects. Our first question comes from Ina, who asks, "Someone once gave me the advice not to talk about your projects too much, since that positive feeling you get from it getting your idea acknowledged makes you feel like you already accomplished it." This is a great question. This is a real psychological phenomenon where basically telling someone your idea, not your idea so much, but talking through the project, or really any goal you intend to do, gives you some of the pleasure of finishing it, so it can actually kill motivation down the line. This is a real psychological phenomenon, and it can affect things. This is tricky because in my personal opinion, I don't have data to back this up, but I don't believe this applies as much to projects as there were electronics, there was prototyping electronics, there was writing code, not to mention all of the the documentation stuff. Brooke, I have nothing I can do about that. What on earth could I possibly do about that? Anyways, there's nothing I can do about my my internet connection. Yeah, I would say tell people about your projects, especially if you're unfamiliar with what you're getting yourself into. Also, Brooke, I love you.
I love you too.
I'm not sure what I'm expected to do about a slow internet connection. Yeah, so especially if you don't know what you're getting into, it's great to talk about your projects because basically they might point something out that will they'll get in your way. On top of that, the delay between when you start a project and when you finish the project is usually so long and so hard that you kind of need every bit you can get. That said, if you're the type of person who finds yourself doing this often, experiment. Try don't be so forthcoming about your about the stuff you're working on. By the way, the original study, I believe, talked about runners, people who were starting like think people who are starting like daily running, they found that when they talked to people about the fact that they were running, they ran for fewer days. And I think this is I just my suspicion is that this has less to do with like electronics projects, but who knows? But that said, there's a corollary to this, which is don't feel like you have to hide your idea. No, if first off, if someone steals your idea, you are so unbelievably unlucky. That happens so rarely. I've had like 100,000 subscribers for months now, and I'm pretty sure only like 3 people have actually reproduced any of my projects. If you're trying to make money off it, if you're you have to talk to people about it. You have to reality check your idea. So if you're worried about people stealing it and commercializing it, file a provisional patent. But do whatever it takes to get the word out right now. The concept of hype and surprise doesn't exist in 2020. There are no such things as spoilers anymore. Talk right now. Trust me. Let's see our second. Let's find another question here. I got someone hooked on an SLA printer. Yes, resin master race. Now it's my responsibility to let you know which one you'd say is a good starter. This is relevant to finishing projects. Having the right tools is important. Otherwise, you spend project time working on your tool. I use the Frozen Sonic Mini 4K. I think it's an excellent machine. I would recommend for resin, pretty much any monochrome printer is good. I think the Anycubic Mono is a really good bang for the buck. I think it's for around like $250. It's really powerful, really fast. Get a monochrome printer. If you're getting an FDM printer, like I've made my love of Prusa printers known pretty far and wide. I wouldn't recommend anything else. But whatever it is, remember that when you get a garbage tool, especially a 3D printer, I don't mean garbage so much, but like if you get a low-end tool, they cut corners, and some of those corners they cut could be relevant to your project. If you try to save too much money on your tools, you're going to waste time that would otherwise go into your project. Let's see. We got some real... All right, here we go. AJB2K3, not a question, but says, in most cases, real life is the biggest issue preventing finishing projects. That is... I don't think that's... I can't say that's inaccurate because, yes, it's true. But when folks say that real life got in the way, what you're actually saying is that you have poor time management. Real life gets in the way by putting new tasks in your hand by throwing new tasks in your lap that you don't have time to work on. And basically that means you just haven't finished the project fast enough. The longer the project goes, the higher the chance that life will get in the way. It doesn't this has nothing to do with difficulty either. It's simply that for every unit of time that passes, there's a chance that you get hit by a car, your toilet overflows, you have to take care of you have to take care of your cousin's kids, all that stuff. When you start a project, finish it as quickly as possible. Even still, you should always be trying to structure your project so that you are, instead of doing a lot of work and then project over, you are sort of making a project and improving it, like sort of mini projects. That way you can stop at any time. If real life gets in the way, you just, you hit the eject button and you have a working project. So if you feel like real life is getting in the way of your projects, move your schedule, try to rearrange your projects so that you finish things faster. It'll give fewer opportunities for life to get in the way. Let's see. Okay, we got some we have some YouTube comments here. I am going to be answering most of my questions on hackaday.io, but we'll field the occasional YouTube question or two. Retro Telephone asked, does Zach have YouTube comments streaming to his eyeball? Unfortunately, no. The computer that this thing is attached to is running this Android 8 or something, and YouTube won't actually run on it. I have a timer going on it, so I can make sure I don't put too much time into any individual questions, so that everyone gets a chance. Let's see. Oh, Saulo Barbosa Oliveira asks, are you making a living with YouTube only? That's not a project question. Come on, I am making a living with YouTube only. it's tricky. The channel's not large enough to fully support it. But let's look at some project questions. Oh, this is an excellent one. Jordan Brandis asks, "Do you find that you usually work alone? What are your views on teams versus solo work?" This is an excellent question. Nearly every one of my projects I work on completely alone, and I mean that in the strictest sense of the word. I don't ask questions on Stack Overflow. I don't get in touch with other people. I rarely ask for help. My mentality is always like, instead of asking for help, I just try to backtrack and find a different way around. I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. I think it's more like pathology than strategy. But it is what it is. I will say that when you're working with a team, you have to make absolute certain, first off, that everyone on your team is busting their butt as hard as you are. Basically, and the team has to work well together too. You can't. You quickly lose the benefits of working as a team if you guys are bickering and infighting, or even simply disagreeing. Time spent talking is not time spent building. Another aspect of working with a team is that you have to remember, you have to be very careful in that if somebody the more team members have unique skills or have a unique ability, like happen to have enough time to put in a lot of brute force, the higher chance that anything goes wrong in any of their lives and knocks them out of the project. Remember what I said before about the longer a project goes, the higher chance life gets in the way? Well, multiply that by the number of critical team members, and basically you've got a formula that you have to finish this project absolutely immediately, or something will happen to one of your teammates. If you are working with a team, either finish the project in a flash, or make sure the teammates are interchangeable. Personally, I have a hard time working with teams. I just don't. I tend to think of things in a scattershot way that doesn't really lend itself well to collaborating. Is it good or bad? I don't. It's probably bad, but it's too deep ingrained in my personality. I'm too insecure to ask people for help. If I'm asking someone for help, I am deep in the doo doo. Yeah, that's it. If you have the ability to work in teams, I would recommend it. In return for having a higher chance of life blowing the project to pieces, you also have a vastly reduced chance of something completely blocking you. Remember, in order for something to completely block the project, it has to block all the team members. So you can often make your way through things. Another aspect to remember, oh man, this is a great question, is that the more people are in the team, the less creative you'll be. Humans always reach consensus, and unless your team has a tremendous number of people in it who who aren't really vulnerable to this, which is rare, you will find consensus building and design by committee taking root in the team. A team just works better when it's a bunch of people supporting one person, so that one person can splash out and not have to justify themselves to everyone else. If you are in a team, by the way, make sure you're paying attention to the people who you never hear from. Everyone has an opinion, and if you haven't heard from someone in a while, it's not that they don't have an opinion, it's that they're being trampled over. I could talk about this the whole time, but I have to take some other cues. Let's see. Ooh, obvious. Matthew B. Barthet asks, obvious question, what do I need to start making projects, and where do I go for ideas and advice? The ideas part, I'm actually making an entire episode, and that's going to be Saturday's episode. Hopefully, I can make it on Saturday. It's going to be about how I come up with ideas and how I refine them and get them to a point where I can build projects. Where do you go for advice? Personally, I don't. But, I mean, this is going to sound very self-serving, but my Discord is awesome. I know we have a few of my Discord members here, and I just created that as a way to, promote my videos if YouTube ever cans me. But it's turned into, just a really genuinely supportive community, and we have members you can ping if you ask specific questions. I prefer a chat over, a forum or anything, because what you really want is to get in one of those one-on-one discussions and, just talk it through. 5 minutes of just one-on-one chatting tends to beat the hell out of weeks of waiting around for people to answer online. If you have a hackerspace, you should absolutely get to the hackerspace. Don't ask the hackerspace, like, will you teach me how to do this? Will you show me how to do this? Do members work together on this? Because the answers will all probably be no. Instead, join the hackerspace, just show up, ask people, show up again, ask people more. Yeah. And what do you need to start making projects? Well, you need the materials. I've been told my audio is very low. Allow me to crank up the tunes, literally. Oh, there we go. Yeah, my levels look right over here. So if you're still having some issues, raise the roof. To start making projects, you're gonna need time, more than you think you'll need. You should budget 3 to 4 times as much time as you think you'll need. You'll need money. You have to buy all your materials. I always recommend when you're buying materials, buy 2 extra or 20% more of every single component. Remember, these components won't go to waste because you're already using them in one project. There's no reason why you wouldn't use them in another. And also make sure you keep time and schedule open. You can't jam-pack a schedule because you need some wiggle room to spot opportunities and to deal with things that go wrong. No plan is ever perfect. But no, like what's the quote? No war has ever been won according to plan, but no battle has ever been won without one. Yeah, the best, if you're just getting started, the best thing you can do is to pick a project that's reasonable. In other words, you want a project that has as little math and science and real engineering as possible. It's fine if it has lots of soldering or a lot of 3D printing or a lot of, or is expensive. But what you don't want is something that requires you to write a complicated algorithm or learn something that's cutting edge or like work with a weird tool chain. Yeah. Chalmers asks, how do you deal with partners backing out of projects? Well, ideally, your partners shouldn't back out of projects. If your partners have integrity, they'll give you enough advance notice before they eject that you can replace them or wind their work down. But that said, like if you're in a team, it's your responsibility to know what's going on inside your teammates' heads and on their schedules. It's up to you to decide. It's up to you to figure out whether they are likely to jump or not. Unfortunately, that comes to the territory. Like remember that in anything with a group, you're the only person who will, because of like diffusion of responsibility. Basically, no one takes action first in a group because everyone thinks someone else will do it. So if you're ever in a group, remember that you personally are the one who has to take action because no one else will. I know it's a bummer. Yeah. Post a transcript. Oh, Dan says he'll post a transcript on the chat. I feel bad for whoever has to do that. All right. Let's see. We have a question from YouTube. Ethan's dad Marcus asks, "Would you say you're so good at finishing projects because of your great focus? Because I'm working a wearable computer." No, I'm terribly unfocused. I have ADHD, and even with medication, it's really hard. The only way I can focus is by eliminating other distractions. So I have a very rigid. I'm very rigid about only working on 2 projects at a time. And unfortunately, I've had to break that recently because we're moving and I've had to stack 3 projects on top of each other. And it's not a pleasant experience, I'll tell you that. But I try to only have 2 projects going at once. And if I'm working on 2 projects and a new idea comes along, I either have to write it down and move on, or I have to scrap one of my existing projects. I'm very rigid about that. And I think it forces me to just finish up and move on. On top of this, this is tricky to say, but basically YouTube has forced me to move my projects along at an astronomical rate. Before, like projects that I would do for clients in 3 weeks and I would do for myself in 1 week of busting my ass, I now have to do in like 2 days. So it's pretty fun. Let's see. Jim Brawny asks, how do you decide which project to start if you have multiple in mind? I usually have a huge number of ideas like swirling around. What happens, though, is that none of them motivate me to actually get moving. Instead, something happens in the real world that hooks onto one of these ideas and drags it out. For instance, like I've wanted to build mechanical keyboards for ages, and I had to record an episode that involved 3D printing. Hey, now's a great time to build that mechanical keyboard. I've had this idea for feeling electricity for ages. And it wasn't until I needed to connect something to this vibrating wristband that I'm like, maybe now's the time to look into this. I think the Thunderfinger, that vibrating wristband that I made to detect current, is actually a great exemplar of this, because at the time I came up with the idea, I didn't think it was possible. That was one of the rare times where I got into a project before knowing the exact shot to it. I don't like starting a project until I feel like I know exactly what I'm building. I don't like having to flounder around. I don't like learning new things. I do it only as a last resort. And that project, I went in expecting to learn new things. It's kind of neat. Michael Murillo asks, do you use a PDM tool, personal data management, for solo projects? How do you organize the knowledge you accrue? I've been using Atlassian tools, but it's not geared towards solo engineering. You're going to hate me for saying this, but it's all in here. I find that any solid idea I have, I'll come up with over and over again. I just have this encyclopedic memory of the properties of nearly everything I've encountered. I do, as a backup, I do keep a list of video ideas, because if I need a video idea, like when you get stressed, you're less creative. So I keep this list of ideas so that if I'm in a stressful situation and I need a video idea, I can just yank one out. But pretty much it's all in here. I don't really make sketches unless what I'm doing is so confusing and complex and things have to be added in a certain order. Then I'll write it down just so that when I get deep in the zone, I remember to do things correctly. But it's really all up here. Let's see. Vincent asks, do you ever get a flood of ideas all at once in the middle of another project? If so, where do you keep them until you're ready to start the next project? I do have a list of... All right, so... I do have a list of project ideas on Evernote, but I don't believe I've ever actually looked at it. I in fact, I don't think I've ever actually read it. I don't know why I put things on it. If I come up with a good idea, very few ideas are that good that I'm like, all right, that's it, eject. I'm undoing all this work and throwing it all in the trash so that I can get started on this. Very few ideas are that good. I'll just keep it in the back burner and I'll keep thinking about it. It'll keep simmering away on the stove. I got the themed mug too. I got the shirt and the mug. It's I don't know, like, I feel like some people are just overwhelmed by, like, the urge to make a project. I don't think that really happens so much anymore, because, like, I immediately start spinning through what it'll take to actually implement it, and that generally, like, you know, throws a wet blanket on it. I don't really get burning desires to build something specific anymore. It's more like trying to match the right opportunity with the right project. I was thinking something really interesting there, and I can't remember what it was. We were talking about projects. I think a lot of people have this fear that a lot of people feel like ideas are precious, and they feel like if you don't write it down, then that genius will leave you forever, and eventually you'll hit some point in your life where you're just out of ideas. And if you had only written that one down. Ideas are the most disposable resource available. Like, people say that trees are a renewable resource, but trees take time to grow. You can come up with 5 ideas right now. Ideas are so easy to come up with, they're effectively worthless. And I guarantee you that idea that you think is so great that you have to jump into right now, if you write it down and take a look at it, you don't even have to wait till the next day. You wait a couple hours, you'll be like, oh my god, was I really ready to spend hundreds of hours on this? Ideas are disposable. Just chuck them out like at will. You can always come up with more of them. Michael Chastain asks an excellent question. What is your threshold for saying no to something based on not having enough experience? Do you do tester projects towards a larger goal? The second question is absolutely. If there is anything I am remotely remotely unaware of on a project, I will make sure to front load that and do it before I even get it into my head that I'm building this project. If there's a sensor I've never used before, immediately buy it and test it. If there's a microcontroller I've never tried before, let's fire it up. I'll give myself 15 minutes. If I can't get code onto it in 15 minutes, it's in the trash. My threshold for saying no to something is extremely low. Basically, if there is literally anything in the project that I haven't done before, I need a really solid reason why I'm doing this project in particular. In fact, the last project I can think of that has something I've literally never used before is the somatic data glove, which I'd actually built like a year ago or something, which used machine learning. And I only picked that up because I thought embedded machine learning would be like a way to earn money. No, my threshold is extremely low. The difference, it's not. I don't like learning. Fine, I'm a bad nerd. But also the time difference and also the variance difference between projects you know how to do and projects you don't is a chasm. Like I could probably estimate how long it'll take me to do a project where I've already done that stuff before, down to about, I'd say I could estimate that probably around plus minus 25%. But if I don't know what I'm doing, that thing could take 10 times as long. It's possible to know. We have a YouTube question here. Let's see. This is an excellent one. Clutchoid on YouTube asks, what about finished projects? What the hell do you do with them? That is an excellent question. There's this cognitive bias called the IKEA effect, which is that people are irrationally attached to things that they create. And I try as hard as I can to just pitch stuff, but the fact that I can use things in future episodes makes it really hard to throw things out. So unfortunately, I save way too much stuff left over from past episodes. Like within arm's reach, I've got this rocket that I printed to show transparent prints. I've got a 3D printed trebuchet. I've got the buff Corona from the 3D printing episode. I've got half a Nerf blaster that I'm probably never going to play with anymore. Yeah, it's really hard. The projects are piling up. I really need to get rid of them. The original plan, if you're curious, behind the scenes, the original plan on my Patreon was to give away projects to my patrons. But it turns out that you can't do that. Not only does Patreon not allow it, but running a lottery like that is illegal. I would instead have to make it I would instead have to open it to everyone, and I can't give patrons extra tickets or anything. I figured that I didn't want to do that because all it takes is one person in Alaska to win a big heavy project, and I suddenly have to pay $400 to ship it. The projects are just piling up. I have to figure out something to do with them because we're moving to Colorado, and I'm gonna have to schlep all this garbage with me. Oh my. Nathaniel asks, how would you handle projects that seem to be unfinishable due to factors such as constant issues? Another question, when do you cut your losses and get someone else to finish the project and scrap it? These are both, I like these questions are together because I think the answer is together as well. I covered this a lot in my video a few weeks ago on how to finish projects, but if you just are hitting headwind after headwind, you just have to keep evaluating, is the project worth finishing? Assuming that I'm going to keep encountering all this crap, is the project worth finishing? If the project is worth finishing, whip out your machete and keep hacking your way through the bush. But if you've been working on it for 2.5 years and you think it's not worth it to put another year into it, cut it. What do you do? When do I know to cut my losses? It's really simple. Is the project worth finishing? Second question, is there another project that would be worth finishing instead? And those should dictate it. And if you got to be really aggressive about killing projects, especially if you've been working on them for a long time. The longer you've been working on a project, the harder it is to cut it. So the more you should mentally weight that math. You should put your thumb on the scale in favor of throwing it out. When in doubt, chuck it out. This is a good one. JD asks, what's your balance of practical projects versus for the memes type projects? This is really relevant to me because I'm a content creator. I try to only do practical projects. There are tons of YouTubers who make meme projects, and I think A, it's done to death, and B, there's no way I can go toe-to-toe with, like, Styropyro or Michael Reeves or Electro Boom or anything, so I have to make the projects at least ostensibly useful. That said, my next project is really useless. Sort of. It's tough. It's tricky. I tried to not do meme projects unless they are going to take, like, an hour. Like, I rigged up, like, at my parents' place, I rigged up the medicine cabinet that when you open it up, it says, "Pills here!" But yeah, that's like an hour. That's about how long I would take to do something dumb like that. That said, like, the pressure to make stupid meme projects is almost overwhelming, on account of, being a YouTuber. So, at least for now, I try to make sure that even the goofy projects are still ostensibly useful. They're pragmatic flavored. That's how I put it. Let's scroll back in chat. I feel like I missed a few folks. Eric Olson asks, I'm an electrical engineer, but while making and testing a PCB, I spend 10 times the time on mechanical and UI design. How do you stay working on the boring stuff in your specialty? This is something that is near and dear to my heart, because the thing that I suck at is programming. I can program. I'm a great programmer, in my opinion, but I'm not a very fast programmer. I'm really slow. I make a lot of mistakes. I have to backtrack a lot. So generally I spend the first 90% of the project building the project, and I spend the next 90% of the project writing the code. The problem for me is that the code is generally the last thing in the project. So that means that pretty much every project I build ends on this endless death march slog of having to code. It sucks. There's no way around it. You just have to do it. You have to grit your teeth. You just have to do it. I would recommend, the more you hate it, the more you should make yourself a game plan. You should list out all the things to do, cut it down as aggressively as possible, and just check things off as you do them, just to remind yourself that this hell will end. And, you got to focus on getting faster. I have been trying really hard to improve my programming productivity. And a big part of that is trying to do as much in Python as possible. But yeah, if you're having a hard time writing, like doing your modeling, maybe you need a new modeling program. Maybe your CAD program sucks. If UI is holding you back, maybe you need to just familiarize yourself with some universal framework like tkinter or like some JavaScript thing. It's pretty tricky. But you just have to do it. Unfortunately, it's part of the goal. It's part of the game. If you have the ability to do so, try to front load the crap. Try to do the stuff you don't want to do first, because then you still have that momentum, that burst of enthusiasm, and that might carry you through. That beginning of that awkward, obnoxious beginning stage. I talk about this a little more in depth in my video, but it can also help to kind of identify ahead of time what the good parts of the project are. And then, when you're working on the stuff you hate, every once in a while you can say, all right, I've had it with this crap. I love soldering. I'm just going to go solder for a bit. I think that's nice. Zayden asks, how do you deal with selecting between different options you can choose for a project? Analysis paralysis sucks, and I generally don't. For projects, I usually just come up with an idea on how to do it, and then I'll sanity check it. So I'm not really picking between options. I'm really thinking of one thing, which is for better or for worse. Sometimes it'll launch me headfirst into building a project that that's ill-advised. But on the whole, don't optimize projects. Just straight up, no matter what your definition of optimum is, don't optimize projects. It's a poor use of your time. This isn't a job you're being paid for. You're not handing this code off for someone else to work on. You might be open sourcing it, but no one's going to read it. Don't optimize anything. As soon as you come up, if you have a bunch of solutions, just rank them by how quickly you can finish them and pick the fastest. If you're having trouble picking between two of them, toss a coin. It's not worth trying to. It's not worth doing it analyzing, paralysizing yourself over them. If you're really having a hard time, just do a little investigative journalism into each one. right? Like, look into, like if you're trying to pick between 3 libraries, right? Try just, whack together a hello world in each of them. Maybe one of them will turn out to be easier than the others. If you're trying to pick between different dev boards, right? You just look at the tool chains for them. Like, oh, Teensy Arduino is really easy to install, but like this Raspberry Pi Pico is kind of weird. That can help guide it too. Generally, when you're building a project, you want to move as fast as possible with as little variance as possible, the highest chance of succeeding, the least chance of unexpected complications. And that usually guides most of the selection choices. Let's see what's going on here. Ooh. Zeke asks, I've put together a STEM club at my school, and we all want to learn more about electronics and programming. We're having trouble finding a project to take on, and more importantly, finish. Any advice? And this follows from... This chat keeps auto-scrolling down, and I can't read it. Blakely Clask asking, what's a good first project? I don't think there... I mean, Mechanical Keyboard was one of the ones I recommended, but on the whole, a good first project... First off, has a low chance of spiraling out of control. There isn't complex... The number one thing you want to avoid for your first project is complexity. You want the fewest moving pieces possible, because when you're building hardware, everything is the enemy. If you are building if you want a robot to be your first project, right? And your robot keeps falling over, right? That could be, your code could be messed up, your motors could be too weak, your PID algorithm could be tuned poorly, your robot's center of gravity could be too far forward, it might be particularly humid that day and it's affecting one of your sensors. You have to pick projects that have as little to them as possible. So things like back in the day, I built like a TV begon. That was a fun little soldering project. Mechanical keyboards, I think, are a great first project. There's just a lot of soldering. Most 3D printable projects, like anything that's purely 3D printed, is going to be pretty straightforward and easy. Trying to make a game would be fun. That's a lot of software. You just want to avoid things, especially that involve a lot of math, that involve a lot of complexity, and that involve a lot of tuning. So if you're thinking about making a 3D printer from... Back in the day, this was 3D printers and drones. When I first got into this, everyone and their dog wanted to build a 3D printer and a drone, and they were teaching themselves electronics so that they could build 3D printers and drones. And I started a hackerspace back then, and of the few dozen people I saw, not a single one came remotely close to ever having a 3D printer or a drone. And the thing that got them was the complexity of the projects, and that you have to tune it afterwards. You want, when you solder that last joint and you upload that final cut of the firmware, you seal that shell together, you want the project to be over. You don't want to be... You don't want to then have to like tune PID algorithms and gyro compensation and crap for the next 300 hours. It sucks. Let's check out what's going on the YouTube. JD Kemsley asks, how often do you take on projects where a successful outcome might not even be possible? Never. Absolutely never. If I don't believe I can finish it, there's no reason to start it. That said, the second part of the question is to determine the plausibility of a technique. I will readily... I do a ton of research. I go looking for trouble very often. I do a ton of research, and if I think a part could be promised... If I think, like... If I go online and it passes the sanity check, like I think I can program with it, I think I can put it into a circuit, it seems like something useful, I'll just buy one and then just quickly whack together a test circuit. Just get an idea of how it behaves, how it reacts to various circumstances, any gotchas or gimmicks. Past that point, I know whether it's possible or not. Like, for instance, when I got started doing somatic, right? All right, I built the glove first, but that was because I needed a project to wear to the Hackaday SuperCon. But before I got too serious about the project, I downloaded TensorFlow and I just tried gathering some data and whacking a model together. And it turned out to be a lot easier than I expected. That said, if there are any unknowns in your projects, you have to test them first ahead of time. Unknowns just demolish projects. Let's see. Do projects ever really end? Ryan Gill asks, do projects ever really end, or do you just say it's done for now? Both of those are true. I strongly believe that you should definitively conclude your projects, but I also believe that I also believe that the best way to make a sophisticated project is by making a simple project and then building off of it. So like so using the glove again as the example, right? I first built this glove, right? It's just a standalone glove with sensors. Then I added the machine learning network, right? And I recognized a few gestures, and then I recognized letters, and then I added in a mouse, and then I added in scrolling. So you should have an end in mind, and a very definitive end as well. And then you can continue to build off of that. But yeah, this whole idea that, oh, the project's never truly ending, I'm always tinkering with it. No, end your project. Put a bow on it, stick a pin in it, put it online, move on. Life is too short to spend it tinkering with the same radio for the rest of your existence. Let's see. Oh, this is a neat one. Froylen asks, FR01 Lan asks, how do you deal with over-engineering projects and bloated designs? Oh boy, I have a very hard time with this. I tend to get an idea for a project, and I'm just like, oh, I can add this on, I can totally do this, I can totally do this, I can totally do this. That's the wrong mentality, though. When you're talking about features, the question isn't, can I do this? It is this one, is this worth doing? There's only really one way to prevent yourself from over-engineering, and that is to have an endpoint. You have to have a fixed point in time past which you are going to release whatever it is, and that has to be hard as well. Like you have to have that endpoint, or you'll just, let me tinker this. Let me tinker with this. Let me tighten this up. Let me comment this code. Nope. You have to have an endpoint. There's only one way to prevent scope creep, and that is you have to lock the scope down. You have to write out, these are the features, and I can never add anything else to this list. I can only eliminate things. Those are really the only ways to do it. And you should too. Like, next time you come up with, try and experiment. Like, next time you come up with a project, write out all the features, write out all the stuff that'll go into it. And I mean exhaustively, right? Like the part where you glue the bit to the glove, right? The training utility to make the machine, everything. Write it all out, cut 50% of it, and then try to build the project. I guarantee you that you'll build the project. You're like, try it. Just slice 50% of the features off something and just try to make it. It'll be a lot easier than you think. At this point, my rule is, if I'm even considering cutting it, I just cut it. Especially when you're making videos. If there's a shot you don't like, you don't even wonder whether it's worth keeping, and you just get rid of it. You can always making something smaller. You can always adjust the size of stuff. Let's see. Quality says, I don't have a problem finishing projects because I'm too scared to start them. Any suggestions? This can be tricky. I mean, this is likely there. So when people hear this, right, the first thing they think is fear of failure, which can be the case. A lot of people are afraid of failure. I found, like, I used to be. Just remember that. Well, there's what there's what the psychologists say, which is like, it's always worse in your head than it is in real life. So you could try some exposure therapy. Just release garbage and see how little people care about it. There's also the fact that your reputation really can't. Your projects really won't shift your reputation that much, in one way or the other. I don't think people will care either way. Even personally, like, even me right now, like, I know there are some people who like some of my projects, but I think people watch the videos for me, not the projects. Just get the stuff out there. What I was saying before, though, is that this isn't always a fear of failure. Sometimes this can come from some insecurity about, like, how people will see you. This is something, like, I'm not really an engineer. I don't have an engineering degree. This is something that really, really affects me. I never, like, for a very long time, I just never shared anything I built because, like, I'm not really an engineer. I'm not doing any, like, advanced computer science. I'm not doing any crazy circuits. I'm really just taking stuff online and really just taking stuff online and mixing it together. But, like, people like that are just, it doesn't it's not the way the real world works. There are judgmental nerds out there, but they're outnumbered 1,000. They're outnumbered 10,000 to 1 by people who are ambivalent or positive. So just jump into your project. Stop thinking about it. Come up, get the idea, write out a plan to make it happen. Cut half of the plan, and then just get going. Worst case scenario, which is pretty likely at first, is the project doesn't come together. Womp womp. Oh, hey, we got a super chat. Gabriel Stevens, thank you so much for the Canadian pesos donation. Zach, I have an issue where I come up with dozens of project ideas when I'm too busy, but I become lazy when I have time. In other words, I have a procrastination complex and a huge to-do list. Any advice? Oh, this can be tricky. Oh man, this can be tricky. I think the first off, coming up with a bunch of project ideas, like, that's great. Like, if you're the type of person who will be able to remember them, do so. Otherwise, like, mess around, like, or just, write them down, come back to them later. I found that studying was profoundly uncreative. I would often come up with ideas just as my head tried to, like, get me doing something remotely interesting. But if you're talking about the downtime, this is tricky. Motivating yourself for projects, it demands its own episode. This is something that I don't believe I can answer effectively in a format like this because of how complex it is. But short thing is, if you should not have any trouble motivating yourself to do things you want to do. Presumably you want to make your projects. If you're having trouble motivating yourself to do things you want to do, like make projects you're excited about, that could be a sign of, like, burnout, mental fatigue, even depression. I'm not saying that a guy who just gave me Canadian bucks is depressed. But what I am saying is that what's stopping you from building projects might lie beyond the project itself. It might be something that could help you that if you attacked it could help you in other areas of your life. It is a very tricky question, though. Motivating yourself to get going can be hard. Motivating yourself to keep going can be hard. I just think about the end point. I think about what I'm working towards. I just think, like, won't it be so cool if I can, like, just walk down the street and write out, like, just flap my hand around and write an email, and then it just appears there in front of me. That would be the coolest thing ever. I just keep that in mind. Now I can think. I think, like, wouldn't it be rad to like break into some building and, like, pull out my cyber deck and hack in and yeah, okay, spoiler. I'm not really going to break into a building, though. I'm going to get permission. But motivation can be tricky. We have another super chat. Oh my, you guys have to give Hackaday the money. Michael's thank you so much for your donation. Thanks for the inspiration to finish projects. Thank you for using it to build projects. I mean, that's why I do all this. I want you to finish more projects. Let's get back to some Hackaday questions. Oh no, it's Shreya Aura asks, any advice about home automation? What's a good way to start for it? I'm trying to make a system, and what you said is very relevant. Oh no, Shreya Aura. Oh no. Home automation is one of those cursed projects. It's an endless abyss from which there is no escape. You will never get the system good enough. It'll never work the way you want it to. You'll spend weeks of your life trying to close the blinds when you turn the TV on. All I can say is keep the system as tight and small as possible. Have the fewest number of hubs, and make sure you buy things that have first-party compatibility with the hub. Like, if you're going to do your lights, keep it all Philips Hue. If you're going to do, smart outlets, like, keep them all Belkin. Just keep. I'm not endorsing these brands in particular, but keep it as contained as possible. As many things that have first-party compatibility. If you're doing wireless, test beforehand, right? Make sure your wireless signals will actually be able to make it around. If you're doing internet, your entire system will inevitably fail. If you're doing X10, make sure that the right circuits in your house are connected. But just be aware. Home automation is a nightmare abyss that will consume your life. We have another super chat. No, we don't. I just have two. Oh, hey, Damien Sixberry. Thank you very much. It's Trey follows up. What if I do everything with a Pi and a bunch of relays? All right, that's fine. If you keep it all with one device, I think you'll be fine. It's when you start having when you start having like Lutron products and Philips products and like Belkin products and homemade items and Alexas and all that crap. Hey Alexa, play Despacito. It's when you have all of that things really start spiraling out of control. Cray asks, Zach, I keep messing up some of my Autocad projects. What do you think I should do to focus more on Autocad? I haven't used Autocad in a very long time. I mostly use Fusion and OpenSCAD at this point. If you're struggling too much with your program, try a different program. Plain and simple. I used to struggle nonstop with Final Cut Pro, and eventually I realized with all the time I'm spending messing around with Final Cut Pro, I could just learn something else. So I learned Premiere, and so much better. Just try a different program. See if it works better. I personally like Fusion. SolidWorks. If you're used to the AutoCAD workflow, SolidWorks could help out. Just a bunch of ideas. Let's see. We have another super chat. You guys are excellent. John Rowley asks, how do you organize your work area? I find there's never enough space to build a workspace that works. OpenSCAD for the win. OpenSCAD! Number one recommendation is to buy a really big desk. Brooke, how long is my desk?
6 by 3.
My desk is 6 feet by 3 feet. Buy the biggest workbench you can have and get as much stuff as you can off of it. Like, mount your monitor to the wall. Use like hutches and stuff to get your test equipment up. Move hand tools and stuff to a pegboard or to like a sideboard, and most importantly, clean off the workbench when you're done for the day. Clean off the bench. I know it sucks, but trust me, it's worth it. I didn't clean off the workbench yesterday, and I wasted 20 minutes today hunting around for my mic. It sucks. Buy the biggest desk you can. Organize stuff so it's off the desk. And clean it off as best as you can. I also recommend, for me personally, I recommend having separate areas for computer and for hacking, simply because I don't want to have to constantly move my keyboard and mouse around. It might work for you. I would also recommend, if you do a lot of cutting and grinding, things that produce dust, don't do it at your workbench. Do it over a track. Do it somewhere that's easier to clean up. Otherwise, you'll get dust all over everything, and life sucks. Generic Human asks, how do you finish a project you've lost interest in? Well, just ask yourself, is this worth finishing? Considering how much self-control and auto-flagellation it's going to take to finish this project, is it worth doing? And if it's not, just deep six it. Honestly, if you lost interest in a project, that could be your subconscious saying that what drove you before no longer exists. So make sure it's worth finishing. If it's for a client or something, or your job, that's you just have to suck it up. Unfortunately, just think about the paycheck. If your job sucks, figure out your exit plan. But if you're doing it for fun, your fun project should be fun. If you're not enjoying a project that you started doing because you enjoy it anymore, you have to reevaluate whether it's worth finishing. We got 2 super chats. Oh my gosh. Mark Helms says, my ADD prevents me from working on a project till it's done. It seems to be a 14 to 30 day timer to a T. Any advice on long-term focus? I don't think this is an ADD thing. I've been preaching this gospel for anyone who'd listen at the hacker spaces, but I believe that as soon as you get a project idea and you take the first step towards making it happen, which can be telling someone about it, you have lit a 2-week-long fuse. And if you haven't made substantial progress on that project in 2 weeks, you're likely never going to finish. I think there's a second timer, which is 3 months. I strongly believe that if you haven't finished a project, but it's 90 days after you start it, your odds of finishing it are effectively zero. I'm not even sure this is an ADD thing. I think it's just the way human brains work. You need to plan around this. You gotta structure your project so you have the highest chance of having something done 2 weeks after you start. And you have to have at least some aspect of it tied off with a bow by the 3-month mark. Otherwise, you are just setting yourself up for trouble. On top of that, think like if we're talking about a project that's longer than a month, then anything could change. Anything crazy could happen. Like if growing up, like if coming of age, oh my, if coming of age between like 2008 to 2020 has taught me anything, like don't make ambitious long-term plans that require the world to stay stable for a while in order to pull off. You're just setting yourself up for trouble. Break it down to small pieces that you can finish faster. And I don't think it's an ADD thing. I think it's just the way people operate. Us humans just can't sustain motivation for very long. JD Kemsley asks, what's your motivational substance of choice? I mean, if you're talking about prescription drugs, like, unfortunately that's between me and my psychiatrist. I don't. It's got to be something that you talk to a trained medical professional about. Do I like drinking on the job? It's kind of funny. Before, my policy was never drink on the job, but now my projects are really for myself. They're YouTube projects, so I may hit the Balmer Peak from time to time. Damien Sixberry and Richard de Bellevue, thank you very much for the super chats. Damien asks, can you make tutorials? At least now, I haven't figured out a way to make them fun to watch for people who aren't interested in making the thing. So maybe in the future, but at least for now, they're just not fun. Richard de Bellevue asks, if you're moving to the Denver area, start a lab. There are already like 5 hackerspaces in the area. I'm really impressed. I'm going to join one of those before I go through the hell of making my own again. Ugh. Oh my gosh. Let's see. Jade Paradox asks, what if you have to save up money for the project for several weeks or months before you can get started? This is an excellent question. That level, I wish more people showed that level of responsibility. There's no problem. I don't think there's any problem with that, honestly. Like, if you save up a bunch of money for a project and then you lose interest in the project before you have a chance to start on it, that's great. You now have a pile of money. Like, the money isn't earmarked for one project. The money can be spent on anything. That said, I would recommend saving up for the entire project before you buy parts for any of it. That way, if something happens, you have the highest chance of being able to use what you have. But yes, saving up for the project before you start it is absolutely the way to go. You do not want to be in a position. You do not want to expose yourself to the possibility that something happens in your life and you now can't afford to finish your project. You will feel like a total jerkwad. Let's see. I don't know. The scroll keeps snapping down to the bottom. Aiden Procopio asks, can we see what the Opticon looks like from the inside? I can't easily disassemble it right now, but I do have a second shell that I reprinted, and there's not a lot going on the inside. You can see it's got these little holes here that it uses to actually mount the optics. And it's got the 2 halves that kind of like fit together in the sawtooth pattern. This one is resin printed. It's much higher quality than this, but I just haven't had time to mess around and gut it and rebuild it. The Truth Be Sold asks, what's a good starter project for learning PCB design? This is a tricky one. Honestly, your first circuit board design is going to be terrible because there are just so many moving pieces to it, and I guarantee you're going to mess some up. Whatever you do first, don't make it too fancy. Get used to the process and then start getting clever. Build like something small, like a macro pad or like a calculator, or hook up a sensor board or like a large smartwatch or something. But whatever it is, don't try to get too ambitious making it small. And whatever you do, don't make something so small that you can't easily probe it and test it. If you make your project too dense and tightly packed and you don't add test points, you're not going to be able to debug it. I'd pick something straightforward, especially with a lot of surface mount and through hole components, so you can get used to both. I like a macro pad. Oh, we have some super chats. Let's see. I need to scroll to them. Mikhail Groen, thank you very much. Huge thanks. Signing off. It's been good having you. Sam asks, how do you feel about implantable computers and microchips? I am not a cutting edge dude. I don't start using something until it's really useful and mature. Uh, and implantables aren't there yet. I don't see a compelling reason to stab something into my skin, and even if I did, I don't want to get version 1 of it. I don't think implanted cybernetics are well, I don't think they're going to exist in my lifetime. There you go, hot take. Ina asks, you seem like a man that sees opportunities everywhere. How can you prevent these new opportunities from distracting you from current projects? It's really simple. You just don't let them distract you from current projects. You just start your project, and you acknowledge. Like I try to keep 2 projects going. So my mentality is like, I have 2 projects. The gates are closed. They're like, if I come up with an idea, I have to scrap, not set aside, tear apart and return the pieces to their places. Scrap a project to make room for it. And if you have that mentality, this shouldn't be a trap you fall into. Just you remember, you are the one who decided. If you're allowing new opportunities to distract you, you're the one who allowed that to happen. So just don't finish stuff before you start something else. Get in that mentality where you're doing that. As you get used to working like that, you'll also get used to thinking in this way that, like, you'll really start to internalize that it's a way of saying this. You'll really start internalizing that a project is a commitment that locks doors. So you'll think twice before jumping into a project, because something better might come along, and you don't want to have to scrap this one. This is tricky. This is a neat one. Austin Lambert 82 asks, how do you balance learning skills with projects? I don't. Straight up, I learn on pretty much everything technical I know. I learn on the job while working on a project. In retrospect, in retrospect, I'm glad I take those projects because I learn the skills. But it's a massive drain on actually finishing the project. I don't think there's really any good way around it. You have to know how you learn. If you're the type of person who learns best, by like following tutorials and taking lessons, learn some new skills, make a project with them. Learn some more skills, make a project with them. If you're someone like me who's pathologically incapable of learning anything and sitting down and listening to a lecture and following along with a tutorial, unfortunately, the only thing you can do is just bash your head into it in projects. I would say that the balance between learning new skills and building projects, in my opinion, should be massively skewed towards finishing projects. I really only try to learn skills as a last resort. I try to only learn skills as a last resort, and when I have an honest belief that if I don't know this, the world will pass me by. That's part of why I got into building. That's part of why I got into the machine learning thing, because I thought that all the jobs are going to need machine learning, and I don't want to be outclassed by some whippersnapper. But yeah, you know how you learn best. But just try to. It's really easy to become a lifelong student, and a lifelong student is just a fancy way of saying someone who doesn't do anything. So do stuff. I have let's see. Oh, we've got a whole lot of questions from the YouTube. Rayer Cole asks, how do you convince your girlfriend to let you have the time to work on your projects? Brooke, how do I convince you?
I mean, go away.
Brooke loves my projects. One of the first things I did with her was show her my 3D printer. This question is tricky. This question is tricky because it's talking about at least two very different things. One of them could be that you are spending one of them could be that your loved one feels like you're spending too much time and money on projects and not enough on them. And in that case, you have to do some introspection and think is this real? Is she or he? You said girlfriend, but I'm not this applies to everyone. Are they just being too demanding and too controlling, or am I honestly neglecting them? And that requires you to think. Through what is the appropriate amount of time for me to spend with my girlfriend on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. Or this could be simply that they or this could be the sign of this could be the sign of a sketchy relationship. Possessiveness and possessiveness is one of the biggest red flags. But I want to be very clear. It's more likely it's the first one. Someone who asks this is more likely concerned that you're spending time, just concerned that they will be or are neglected. Or if you said wife, I would have approached this differently, because if the person in your house who manages the budget is telling you not to build projects, don't build projects. Don't go broke building projects. If it's fiscally irresponsible, pay attention to that. But you have to be careful in this dynamic. You have to do some real introspection and think, what's the amount of time I want to spend in the relationship, and what's the amount of time I should spend in the projects? Ideally, someone who you can spend the rest of your life with supports what you do for fun and expects you to support them and what they do for fun. So it's a very delicate question, but I'm glad it's one that you're asked. I'm glad it's one you're thinking about. Let's answer another YouTube question. Let's see. I feel like I've been answering the same question a number of times. Jeff Crow asks, as a newbie jumping into a hard project, do you start something big and small, and how soon do you find yourself saying this is way over my head? Electronics especially, but making in general, is diabolically complicated. Everything has just this brutal learning curve where you need to gain a ton of skills just to put your chips on the game board. If you're getting started, there are no easy projects. Everything is hard. It feels like every project you jump into is hard because every project you jump into is hard. It's just the nature of the game. As you get more experience, and as you learn more skills, as you get more familiar with just how the project life cycle works, you'll get better at evaluating time sinks from quick jobs. But when you're just getting started, they're all going to be difficult. Even simple projects will require you to learn new skills. And remember, you don't have the skills to evaluate what skills you have. So they're all hard projects. Dive in, get your ass kicked. If you're the type of person who can learn by studying or being taught, do that instead. If you're a person like me who can't, just fall off the tree of knowledge and smash your face into every branch on the way down. Let's turn back to hackaday.io. This is one I'm surprised no one's recommended. So this is one of them I'm surprised no one has asked yet. Snell asks, advice on making videos from your projects. This is a great question. At some point I have to do a video on how to make videos about projects, but if you can, I would strongly recommend making a video about your project instead of taking pictures or making a write-up. A lot of people say you have to document your projects, and that what they're thinking about writing. Buddy, it's not 2008 anymore. Nobody reads blog posts. Sorry, Hackaday. This is why we're doing a stream for a reason. You have to doing a video is a great way of going about it. First recommendation. Don't document the project while you're building it. You're going to end up backtracking and making mistakes. It's going to screw things up. Second, instead, I would recommend either finish the project and then video building a second copy of the project, or disassemble the project and make your video rebuilding it from scratch. Second thing to remember is projects are boring. Yes, as a guy who makes projects on his channel for a living, projects are boring. They don't do anything but sit there. Right? So you have to add motion and excitement and interest. You notice that in my projects, I'm always doing a time lapse, or I'm pulling focus to cause it to fade into view, right? Or I am zooming in. There's always something, or I'm using it. Basically, there's always something going on to add motion, because if I didn't, the project would just sit there doing nothing and be boring. Third recommendation, people hate looking at code. Just completely ignore the code in your video. You can mention, you can spend a few seconds just saying, I use this. But on the whole, people just do not like seeing code. Remember that the purpose of the video is you have to know if the purpose of the video is to entertain or inform, and you have to go mega hard on the one you pick. If it is for entertainment, Don't think too hard about getting all the information across. Just focus on what makes this fun to watch. What do people want to see? What are they curious about? Like when you're making a video to entertain, imagine that you hand the project to someone, right? Or you let them explore your workshop alone. What are they going to pick up? What are they going to look closely at? What are they going to ask questions about? What are they going to snoop around in? What are they going to marvel at and try over and over again? Those are the things you have to make it in. If you're making it to inform, you then have to decide, am I making reference material or am I making instructional material? If it's reference material, your video has to be designed to be watched over and over again and paused and resumed. You have to add big-ass breaks, tons of annotations, be very clear, zoom into things as you do them. You can't have anything ambiguous in reference material. If it's informational, I would just not do it. Honestly, informational stuff, I don't know how to make it enjoyable or informational enough. The more you try to teach things, the more the comments and the response will be, hey, you got this wrong. But if you're doing instructional videos, I don't think a project is the right way to do it. I think showing a very focused example of it is the way to do it. But that's personal preference. You notice that I personally do very little in the way of instructional or reference content. Pretty much everything I make is to entertain first and foremost, because just really for every person who sincerely attempts to make the project, there are going to be like 50,000 more who just want to see a cool video. Quality the Cactus asks, "What's on your back? Is that a sword?" Oh, this is my Nerf tactical knife. Yes. You can't put a sword on your back, but you can totally put a flexible Nerf knife on your back. Let's see another good one from the Hackaday. Tom Nardi chips in, as someone who has to take screenshots of these videos to write about them online, having it just sit still for a few seconds is nice. That's what. Taking pictures and making video are two separate activities that cannot be combined. You do not put static shots in your video, and you do not pull frames from a video to get static shots. It just does not work. That's what Brooke and I do. Like, we put the thing on the table, we like pull focus on it, we get some shots moving around, we get some shots manipulating it to show off like the shiny bits, right? And then we switch over to then we pull the lens off. We only have one lens between our two cameras. We pull the lens off the movie camera and we put it on the photography camera and we take a few shots of it. Unfortunately, it's just the nature of the game. Coder Guy 6000 asks a rather interesting question. Doesn't have much to do with finishing projects, but how do you not short your laptop with an Arduino? I use an isolated, protected industrial industrial USB hub. Which basically isolates the power for each of the USB ports, and also isolates the data lines. And if you do a lot of hacking, they're very expensive. I think I paid like $160 or something for mine for an 8-port USB hub. But if you do a lot of hacking, it'll save you far more than that in maintenance fees. It's a great device. I would totally recommend it. Coder Guy says, "Oh, he killed his MacBook. Oh no." Yeah, it really sucks to be you, because Macs actually have some of the best power. They have some of the best USB port protection around. So Steve Jobs just cursed you from beyond the grave. Let's turn our attention back to the YouTube. Let's see. Quinn Foster says, "I just spent $200 in parts for a project that I shouldn't have started. Should I try to finish the loose ends first?" You got to ask yourself, is this project worth finishing? You seem to have answered your own question in that no, you shouldn't have started it. So in that case, you got your answer right there. Put the parts in wherever you store parts and just move on with your life. Unfortunately, you're $200 poorer. Maybe you didn't get anything from it. At least you're not $200 poorer and also have 500 fewer hours in your lifetime. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, we got some interesting ones. Oh, these are not. I'm getting bamboozled here. Which one do I take? Brooke, stop sending me so many questions. Pick the good ones. And stop asking me questions. Stop asking me variants of how do I X multiple projects? I feel like we've answered that. 8-bit on our Discord asks, my cousin wants to learn electronics, but I'm struggling to find a starter project that won't get dull. What early projects did you find engaging and keep you motivated? Unfortunately, I'm not the one to ask. It sounds like your cousin's the one to ask. The thing that got me to push forward and just suck it up and keep doing whatever it takes to build electronics was heads-up displays. I just wanted to be a cyborg so bad that I would do whatever it took to become one. So I just smashed my head again. I learned Arduino, I learned 3D printing, I learned like hand fabrication, I learned about modding electronics, I learned circuits, I learned all this stuff because that's just what it took to build a heads-up display. So you gotta find out, like, what's that thing that consumes him so, or her, you said nephew. What consumes him so much? Niece?
Or
Cousin, all right. What makes them so fired up they'll fight through anything to make it happen? And discovering that is part of the process. Without something to motivate them, and that's a very personal thing, it's going to be very difficult to keep going. But at the end of the day, this is something that they have to... This is something that they are leading on. If there isn't any project that fires them up to make stuff, maybe this isn't the hobby for them. I know, them's the breaks. Let's see. Fallen Legend asks, where do you get money for your projects? Is it a hobby mixed with a job, or is it your job? And if so, how do you go till that moment you can make what you want? Well, right now it's my job. And right now it's even... So it's funny, like, I've actually been on 3 different positions in this. Right now, my job is to build my own projects. So I get the money from sponsors or from my glorious patrons. Thank you so much, guys. You rule. And that funds the projects to put on the channel. But before that, I did electronics consulting. I did prototype development consulting, and I was a professional prototyper. And I used my fun funds to pay for my projects. Before that, I just was paying for, like, when I was like in or fresh out of college, like, I just had a stash of money that I'd saved up from internships and stuff, and that was the project fund. And now that I think about it, I'm very lucky that I started getting clients before I fully depleted that fund, because I would have been a sad Zach. I would have been a sad Zach indeed. Rayford asks a neat question. Did you build your workshop or workbench one tool at a time, or did you go through an acquisition stage? It's both. I never buy tools. I actually really don't like buying anything. So I go through waves where I just, I go through waves where one tool starts dying, another tool starts dying, I outgrow another tool, and I'm complaining to someone like, oh my gosh, my life is falling apart. And they say, well, that's because you're using amateur stuff. And I'm like, oh crap, do I really have to? Then I get sticker shock, and even more stuff breaks while I'm waffling on it. And then I'm like, all right, fine, enough is enough. I need to actually buy a proper oscilloscope, so I might as well also get a bench supply, and I also need a decent soldering iron. And well, I've never had I've never even owned a function generator. I think I need one of those too, and I need a logic analyzer. And then I replace a bunch of stuff at once. So it's kind of both. It tends to be all at once, but that's only because it's only because I'm so averse to buying things that I have to it has to reach a boiling point before I'm ready to start shelling out bucks. So if you guys have watched my videos, you've noticed the quality jumped massively in the last 2 videos. Well, there you go. That's the behind the scenes. I bought a ton of photography gear. Michael Murillo asks, how did you manage your time specifically when you had a full-time engineering job? I find it hard to work on projects when I'm mentally tired from work at the end of the day or week. The morning is a good time. Not for me. Not for me. How do you manage your time? This is difficult. You will have to... See, I personally was a consultant, so I could just straight up decide not to work on Monday and spend that time building a smartwatch instead. If you don't have this luxury... you're either gonna... there are really only three ways about it, right? Like, you can try to negotiate to rearrange your schedule. You're going to have to be a weekend warrior, or you're just going to have to half-ass it. You got to stop taking your job so seriously so you can open up more mental bandwidth. Dan has reminded me that we're pretty far over an hour now. Fine with letting it go, but if you need to tap out, let me know. I'm still fine to go. I budgeted 2 hours for this. But I don't know what the Hackaday folks are into. What do you think? What do you think? Ladies, gentlemen, and cyborg, should we keep going, or should we tie it off here? And and I have excellent. So saying it. Keep going. All right, I have excellent latency, so I know you guys are actually thinking that. Okay, let's keep rolling. Ryan Gill on the Tubes of You asks, what are your thoughts on contests on Hackaday and Hackster? I love them. I love these things. They are excellent motivation for finishing projects. Many of my earliest projects that I actually finished were done for contests on Hackster. Didn't exist back then, but on Hackaday. They are an excellent way to like focus yourself on a very specific project and finish it on a very particular deadline. I love them. I entered tons of contests. I used to have an entire wardrobe of those barf green inventables or instructables shirts with the little yellow robot on them. I haven't won anything on Hackster. I don't understand how Hackster judges their projects, but anyways, don't go in expecting to win, right? Don't allow losing to demotivate you, because there are just so many people entering these things. Like, the odds are against you, but they're a great way to focus. That said, back in the day, there used to be a lot of hackathons, and hackathons are terrible. They're bad for your health. Like, staying up for 2 consecutive nights, bashing your head against something that you've never seen before, with the reward of having to pitch it. I don't think they were productive. I don't think going to hackathons, the only thing they ever gave me was like free food and booze. And there was that one time at CES where I swindled my way into CES itself. But that's a story for another day. Do I have an RFID implant? I do not have any implants. I ain't sticking nothing into this bod. Just not useful enough to justify the risk and the pain. Owie, owie, owie. Let's see. Oliver Gaskell 100 says, should I get a 3D printer? Even a cheap one would be a big investment since I'm only 16, but I feel like it'll help me do more projects. 3D printer is like, it's the hammer that makes everything look like a nail. A 3D printer is just so universally applicable that you will use a 3D printer so often that you will just forget about 3D printing altogether, and you'll just take it for granted. Like at this point, I don't even think about like, oh, I could use 3D printing in this project. I'm like, oh, I need to replace this bezel that I broke. Let's 3D print one. Oh, I'm gonna need a knob for this. I'll print that thing. Yeah, absolutely. Since you're young, you probably have a little time on your hands. You can get a fairly inexpensive one. You can get the the Ender 3 or the CR10, which are very, very awkwardly cheap printers. That you are I can only really recommend them because they improve from when you mod them. So yes, for a few $100 for an amount that you could conceivably whine at your parents for a birthday present, you could get a 3D printer and it'll change your friggin' life. Absolutely. Let's see. Adrian Procopio asks, do you have any budget 3D printer recommendations? I don't want to sound like I'm endorsing any of them, because in general I don't recommend buying a cheap printer. But while researching a future video, I found a tremendous number of upgrades and information about upgrades for the Ender 3 in particular. So yeah, at one point it would have been the ANET A8, but it seems like the Ender has kind of usurped that. There are just a ton of mod parts, a ton of improvements, tons of guides. I would recommend. Yeah, I'd again, like, I've never owned the Ender, so I'm only going off secondhand knowledge. But it seems like a good one. Although I would recommend get a PEI, magnetic PEI bed, because screw glue and hairspray. That's ancient history. That's old. That's yesterday's news. Let's see what else is going on the old Hackaday. How do I get this to stop scrolling automatically? Let's see. Dead air. Oh no, dead air. Yes, Dan brings up the constraints are forced onto you by a contest. Absolutely. DJ asks, have you ever thought about doing some projects for people with disabilities? I'm very uncomfortable with doing stuff like this. I don't build any of my projects intending for anyone to actually use them. And the idea of the prospect of making a project and saying, "Oh, this is going to help people with Parkinson's, like paint pictures." The idea of saying something like that and getting all those views, getting all those sympathy views and whatnot, and then, if someone with Parkinson's actually wants to use it, it'd be like, "Well, I didn't really document this, and the code's kind of untested. And it doesn't work very well." That's just kind of gross. So that's why I've avoided doing projects for accessibility and for medical conditions and whatnot, because I don't feel like I do it well enough to actually help them in the long term. It feels like it's just exploitative. That said, I'm sure that one of the wearable projects I put up will eventually be used for stuff like that, because wearables rule, and there aren't a lot of starting points for wearables. Let's get our butts on a YouTube. Dennis Peterson asks, once I figure out how to finish a project, I lose interest in actually finishing it. How do I get over this to finish them? Well, from the sound of it, see, this is tricky because I'm not really sure the dynamics going on, but from the sound of it, it could be that the puzzle of figuring out how to put the pieces together is what's motivating, and it's really interesting. I've never heard of anyone who's motivated primarily by that, but that's great. I would say in that case, pick harder projects. Pick projects where you have to build a bunch of stuff to reach the challenging part. Basically, I'm waffling around this. Make projects that have really complicated software, because then you're forced to build all the hardware before you can do the hard stuff, and then you basically have this really big, really complex problem to solve. This a bunch of needles you have to thread. I would pick stuff with trickier software, just stuff that will keep your gears chugging the entire way through. But at the end of the day, there always has to be some amount of self-discipline. You're never gonna, at some point, you are gonna have to just crack the whip and get yourself to sit down at your desk and get stuff done. Them's the breaks. I know. Jonathan Hunt asks, what made you get into YouTube? I want to say it was the pandemic, but it wasn't. Basically, I had a really long-running contract that kept me busy for 5 years. Ate up most of my time for 5 years. And that ended around December, and I was looking for new clients, and there just weren't too many meetups. There weren't as many meetups, so I decided to I started thinking of doing YouTube videos to find more clients. Then pandemic, no more meetups, and I'm like, oh crap, I guess we have to do this plan. So I ran the numbers, and I realized that if I went full-time on it, I had a pretty decent chance of either getting enough clients to make it work or making it work without the clients. And my hunch turned out to be correct. The math played out, and here I am, talking to people for Canadian pesos and Super Chat. See, the green hoodie asks, how old am I? Gentleman never asks, a lady never tells. I'm just kidding. I just turned 32. I'm 32, right? Yeah, I'm 32. Yeah, I'm old as hell. According to Silicon Valley, I've been dead since 2008. Derek Acosta says, after using your eyewear for years, have you noticed your vision change in each eye? I generally don't wear the computer unless there's a need for it. So really, when I'm off camera, I'm rarely wearing the computer. But that said, it shouldn't cause your vision to change very much. Your eye is used to prioritizing which point of reference it's using to focus. And honestly, if you wear a wearable computer for a long period of time, the only negative effect will be that things will seem really weird, and your depth perception could be messed up if you remove it, because your brain just edits it out. I've actually completely forgotten I was even wearing this thing because I let it fall asleep, and I can't even see the timer anymore. do a backflip. I can't. My apartment's too small.
That's what I told them.
Yeah, the apartment's too small for backflips. Let's see. Adrian Procopio says, I think I should go to class now. I think you probably should too. Oh man. Alwek asks, what's your opinion on the Raspberry Pi Pico as a big Teensy fan? In the abstract, I don't think it's great. Which is, man, it's hard to say. In the abstract, I mean, for $4, you get a lot of stuff for it. The Teensy just grinds it to dust vis-a-vis I/O options and sheer power. Like the Teensy is just crazy. The Teensy is twice as powerful as both of the cores in the Pico working together. It has a bazillion analog pins and tons of interfaces. The Pico only has 3 analog pins, and interfaces like you have to get into the PIO stuff. On top of that, the Raspberry Pi Pico, you gotta it gives you you either have to drag and drop you either have to drag and drop or use a command line to copy firmware in the file system, or use an SWD programmer, which I think are both those are extreme ends. I guess if I have to sum it up, it's that I don't know when the hell I'm ever going to have time to actually try to use one of these Picos in a project. I bought 3 of them as soon as they were announced, and I don't think I'm ever going to have a project. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to actually mess around with them. Oh, it's part of the fun. Oliver Gaskell asks, given the choice, would you use CircuitPython or Arduino C? Depends what I'm building. I know it's such a cop-out, right? If what I'm building has to be really high performance and have really tight timings and good latency, CircuitPython's unworkable. Or if I'm using a microcontroller that can't support CircuitPython, or a topography that can't, such as I don't want the ability for someone to quickly edit my code by messing with a thing on a file system, C is the way to go. I've never actually used CircuitPython. I've just never had a. Usually when it's time to bust out the Python, I'm working on a full-on computer. Generally, I need low power consumption and fast responsiveness for my side projects, or high compatibility with libraries. Arduino's got the libraries. Them's the breaks. Let's get back to finishing a few projects. Let's get back to doing some projects. Let's see. Oh no, that's not a good one. Nuka Cola Break asks, you mentioned that you were in engineering school and you left. What was that decision like? This is relevant to me finishing projects, because when I left, I didn't so much leave as switch from engineering to business, but it felt terrible. I felt like a total failure. I felt like a failure because I was, right? I felt if I had just worked harder, if I had just knuckled down, if I had just sucked it up and did what everyone else did, maybe I wouldn't be here right now. And it really felt bad. I felt terrible, and I beat myself up over it. But only a year or two later, I started building projects on my own, and I was like, wow, I spent an entire week studying the parallel plate equations and the capacitor equations, and I didn't understand what the hell was going on, and I figured out what the hell this thing is for in 15 minutes. And some people can't be taught. You can only learn. For some folks, one project is worth an infinite amount of lectures, and that turned out to be me. I wish there was someone in my life who could have told me that. The people in my the folks in my life were saying something we're mostly saying something well, no one said it would be easy. You just have to knuckle down and fight through it. There wasn't anyone saying maybe you should spend more time in the engineering lab, which I thought was kind of, I don't know, it's kind of an odd realization. Oh my gosh. Noah Combs asked if I have any CAN bus experience. I thought he said any cannabis experience. I played with it briefly in hacking a car, but car hacking projects are a pain in the butt. Let's see. Can you hunt me down a how to finish your projects question or two?
Someone earlier, I lost the someone earlier was asking about a
Give
very
me one
expensive
sec.
project.
Very expensive project. Okay, I'm sorry I can't credit you. The question scrolled off the screen, but what's my take on very expensive projects? Well, projects aren't cheap. All the projects that I've put on my channel so far, the Thunderfinger was cheap. That one probably cost about $150, give or take. But it's not uncommon for me to spend $300 to $500 on a project. Projects are expensive. You have to be confident that you have the money to pay for them. I get the content that the video that everyone wants me to make is like how to build an electronics lab for $300, or how to build a project like top 10 projects you can build for $20. And it's not the right mentality. This isn't a cheap hobby. I know life sucks. Wear a hat. This is an expensive hobby. If you are if you're trying to cut costs that aggressively, you're going to be spending so much of your time working around the limitations of inexpensive stuff, so much time sourcing things, so much time paralyzed in fear because if you burn out your component, that's more money out of your pocket. Just you got to budget enough, and on top of that, you have to have slush available because projects will cost more. Like you'll need extra parts. Projects will cost more. Yeah, personally, if I wouldn't start building a project until I had about $500 to spend on it. Not saying that the project will cost $500, but that's pretty much the upper limit of what a project could cost. As for tools, like I would recommend upgrading your tools as soon as you can, especially if you think you're going to stick with this hobby for a while. Unfortunately, this is a time-consuming and expensive hobby, and there is no secret path. Like, it's an expensive hobby, and it's not because we're idiots. We're not morons who are overpaying for things because we haven't discovered the magic of Alibaba. No, this is an expensive hobby, and things are expensive because you're paying for things that save you time. That's where I go. Michael Anderson asks a great question. Have you ever had to change hardware decisions mid-project? Like the board you wanted to use just wouldn't work no matter what, so you have to switch to something else. Oh yeah, this happens pretty often. For the data glove, I ran through 3 different IMU modules. This is the seventh version of the heads-up display, like the 7th version of the hardware. This happens all the time. Oh my gosh, for somatic. Oh, this is a great one. For the data glove, I built the entire project. I shoved it all together, closed it up. Wasn't working, and it just straight up wasn't working, and I realized that it was because basically there was a difference. I'm not going to go into specifics because I don't have the exact thing in front of me, but basically the TNC 3.2 did not allow you to assign certain functions to certain pins, but the TNC 4.0 did. So I had to rip the TNC 3.2 out of the project. I had to solder in the TNC 4.0, and I had to redo half the wiring because I had cut it perfectly to length. That's the nature of the game. Never be afraid to discard work you've already done. If backtracking can save you time, absolutely do it. Remember the IKEA effect and escalating commitment. If you're trying to decide whether to backtrack and rip out a part of a project, mentally make yourself more willing to do that. Increase the weight of it because you're biased against going back. So like if you're like 80% sure, if you're like 60% sure that backtracking is the right decision, round it up to 100%. You and just don't worry too much about it. Like there's no shame in wasting work. You're just as long as you finish the project, as long as the project remains worth finishing, absolutely. Sammy asks, "Hey Zach, I'm working on a huge project. Should I use a Teensy or an STM32?" I mean, whichever one has the features you're looking for, whichever one you feel more comfortable working with. I mean, if you're starting from whole cloth, I believe a Teensy will be faster to get going with because I think that you have less tool chain to set up, but an STM32 will be way cheaper and like it's a giant product line. Like there are ones with all kinds of peripherals and I/O, so it comes down to what the needs of your project are. I mean, I know that Teensy 3.2 and 4 have native CAN bus. They have a CAN bus hardware peripheral. I don't know any. I'm sure there's an STM32 that does it as well. There's no hard and fast answer. You just pick the one that's more appropriate for your project. If you can't decide, pick whichever one is easier to set up. Yeah, them's the breaks. Oliver Gaskell brings up, I backtracked on a PCB and ripped up half my routing. It ended up being so much cleaner. Absolutely. With PCBs especially, because with PCBs especially, the decisions you make in routing a circuit board depend a lot on the initial decisions that you make and the initial placement of parts. And that means that like just things you could never have seen coming early on just had crazy effects down the line. So yeah, I find this all the time, ripping things up and redoing parts. Are there any questions you want us to ask? Well, anything that's getting in the way of you finishing your project. If we're interested in the general questions, you can check out my Discord. I'm not sure if the link is in the description, but it really should be. But you should check out the Voidstar Lab Discord. I answer a lot of common stuff on there, and I also have a lot of other FAQs. But yeah, anything that's blocking you from finishing your projects, any insecurities, any worries that are that kind of stand in your way. If there's like that project in back that like it's lurking there and you're really embarrassed about it and like you don't want people to rummage through your stuff because they'll find it and ask, what's this? And then you'll be like, I don't want to talk about that. For instance. Yob Dehan asks, do you plan in pre or sub prototypes before you start in the first V1 product? Absolutely. If I've never worked with a part before, I always want to mess around with it before I jump in. Like if I haven't, for instance, the Thunderfinger, right? Like that project was a current sensor on my finger, an LED matrix, an Adafruit Bluetooth feather, and a vibrating wristband. So the first thing I did was I made sure that I could program for the feather, and then I made sure that the feather could talk to the wristband, and then I played around with the sensor, and then I just displayed stuff on the LED matrix. It was only after I knew that each one of those things worked in isolation that I put them together. Even then, I'm still going to backtrack multiple times. I redid the enclosure for that, I think 3 times. Because you just can't think of everything the first time. So yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I do both proofs of concept and first run prototypes. On top of that, like I sometimes view the project itself as a prototype. I often go back and like take revenge on a project, like I'm just thinking, like this is the 7th version of the heads-up display, but the Somatic Data Glove is the clearest example of this because that's version 2 of an earlier version that didn't use a glove. That one was fully 3D printed, and it had way too many poor mistakes. But yes, the second time you do anything, it's crazy. Like, if you've ever played a video game for the second time? You might not necessarily feel like you're that much better after finishing it the first time, but the second time, you just blitz through everything. And it feels the same way with a project. The second time you do something, you already know the gotchas, you already know the things to avoid, you already have stuff that you can work with. You should... Thinking in terms of prototypes and revisions is definitely better than, like, let's build this. Richard de Bellevue has a really practical question. I like this one. My biggest obstacle in getting projects done is finding time between all the other things I have going on around the house. Any tips on getting projects done when you have just a bit of time each day? I think your challenge begins at a lower level. Brooke and I, Brooke and I are moving to Colorado, and we deliberately decided to not live in a house. We decided to live in an apartment in a managed, like a condo type thing, specifically because living in a house just creates so many extra chores that you have to do. I think the first thing to do is to try to open up more time. See if like you can divide the chores a different way. See if you can, like, for instance, if you're cleaning your house, right? It might only cost like $50 once a month to have someone else come in and clean it for you. You can look for ways to get rid of or minimize tasks. Maybe, you're doing something at too high of a standard. Cleaning out the gutters every weekend when you can really do it once a month. Another recommendation is to try to consolidate your free time. See if you can do like, I don't know any specifics, but like see if you can finish a whole bunch of, like, basically see if instead of having 1 hour a night, see if you can get 2 nights with 3 hours. You'll get far more done in that. Unfortunately, past that point, this is a time-consuming hobby. It's just the nature of the game. You'll just have to pick things that are less time-consuming. Things like maybe 3D printing stuff. You can let the printer chooch as you do other things. Programming and things that can be done purely on a computer. If you're commuting, maybe you can switch to public transit and get stuff done on the way home. But on the whole, like, unfortunately, this is a time-consuming hobby. Even my simplest projects, I wouldn't budget any less than 20 or 30 hours for them. It's just the nature of the game. Let's see. Jonathan Hunt asks, I have trouble finding out what type of projects to do. There's such a huge abundance of things that I could do that I end up being paralyzed by all the possibilities. How do you navigate around that? This isn't something I personally struggle with, as you'll find out in my video at the end of this month. But this is something I view a lot. This is something I ran into a lot in just making life choices in general. There's a Venn diagram. Things you're capable of doing, things you enjoy doing, things that do things for you, right? So, for instance, in a job, right, it has to be something that you can actually do the job, right? Like, you actually be qualified. You have to enjoy doing it, and it has to pay you well. If it has all three, go for it. So for your projects, it could be, for instance, a project that you already know, like like you're already a good programmer, so you already know you can program. You enjoy this type of programming, and this particular project will let you enter a contest, or this particular project will be something you use on a daily basis. And once you have all three, they're all good ideas. Sort them by ascending order of how much time it takes, and do the shortest ones first. But yeah, look for things where you can thread the needle like that. I'm just going to announce about a 10-minute warning, so get them in. Sammy says, see if you can find something that your social human side wants to do and figure out how to do with electronics. Other people can be motivating. You might, like, if you're the type of person who likes being the smartest person in the room, you can, joining a hackerspace or joining, for instance, a Discord, for instance, the Voidstar Lab Discord, where you can show your projects off, can just be a wellspring of endless motivation. Like, there's always someone there ready to tell you how cool you are when you finish something. So yeah. Let's see. Aaron asks if you... Oh, no. Aaron asks, have you ever done one-day builds with time as the main constraints? Every project I build from this point... Every project I build since starting the YouTube channel is supposed to be a one-day build. I rarely actually stick there. I really can actually stick with that, but they're supposed to be. They typically end up being a few more days, but yeah, it's tricky. I'm not at the channel is not even close to the stage where I can do like what the Hacksmith does and hire like an entire team of engineers to make sure there's fresh content each week. So unfortunately, every one of my projects has to be done on this bonkers, brutal schedule. So yeah, most of them are. Most of them are. That's a very specific. Someone asked me how I bypass a Lightspeed brand firewall. That's a very specific question, Sir Madame or Cyborg. Red Leader 36 asks, do you use software to track projects? Free Camp, Trello, Excel. Does project management help you? If your project is so big that you would benefit from project management software, your project is way too big. Just carve pieces off of it until you can fit the whole thing in your head. I will, if the project is, I will occasionally like write, like I'll open up Evernote and I'll just write a list of all the tasks to do, but that's more of an aid to figure out what to cut. If you can't keep the whole project in your head, your project is far too big. If your project is taking so long that you need to manage, that you can manage entire days, your project's too big. Cut it. I'm not saying give up on your dreams. I am saying carve your project up into smaller pieces, standalone individual projects that are small enough that you can like envision them and see them through to the end. Joseph Gertz asks, again, how do I bypass Lightspeed Systems firewall? Ask your sysadmin. Michael Anderson asks, how do you mark the differences in projects? For example, like, how do you version your projects? Is there a particular metric you use? It's kind of funny. Internally, if you look at my computer internally, I have, like, for instance, like, let's say data. Let's say like my smartwatch, right? I have it's called the smartwatch. So the version 2 was called Revenge of the Smartwatch. And version 3 was called Revenge of the Smartwatch. And eventually I will change those to, eventually I'll change those to like to give them their own name, generally in a series. I often have working titles for projects, like my first rapid, like the rapid strike from my video, the Meta Breaker. Its working title was the hot beef injection. So the second version I was working on that I threw out in that episode was called the human booster shot. Internally naming a project is always fun. You can lose a lot of time trying to name a project. In general, I'll use mark. Like if I have to, I'll use marks. So, like, you know, I'll have Mark 1, Mark 2. Generally, I'll use subversions, like, you know, 1.1. Generally use subversions until so much has changed that the projects are incompatible. Then I'll make a new version. Which is kind of an interesting one. Billy Rubin asks, how do you take care of your mental health when you're working such a crazy timeline? Unfortunately, there's very little to do. Unfortunately, there's very little possible. Just have to. It comes down to sound time management. Just try to orchestrate things so that when I burn out, I can land it in a place where I don't have to produce a project that week. I know it's not very healthy. A part of it is figuring out when to clock out each day, right? Like figuring out when, figuring out that enough is enough. Forcing myself to do other things other than work. Like I force myself to have dinner with Brooke as much as possible. I try to have dinner with Brooke every single night. I try to play at least an hour of games every night. And good time management. Like the only way to limit the damage is to prevent tasks from piling up. So a single day of procrastination could mean like a total mental collapse in 3 weeks. Unfortunately, it's the nature of the game, and I have no right to. And like, I need to make this very clear. I'm not complaining. I get paid for this, right? I get paid by sponsors. I get paid by patrons. I get paid by YouTube. I have relinquished my right to complain about this. I love this job, and people support me for it. So I'm not complaining at all. It's just the nature of the game. If this isn't something you can deal with, unfortunately, you got to pick a different profession. 5-minute warning, but it is tricky. I think it's important to recognize it's important for me to recognize when I'm hitting the point of diminishing returns and eject. Like once I'm at that point where if I continue working, I'm going to start burning out. I have to move on. And if that means cutting the project down or calling a sponsor and moving a video, it's the way it's got to work. This has gone into has gone really nuts because of the move. Like, yeah, Brooke is handling the logistics of the move, but still complicates everything. There's still a lot of stuff to plan, and it's put strain on my already bursting schedule. So, you know, it's tricky. It's part of the fun. Projects with Red asks on YouTube, how do you plan the project video while making the project? How does that work for you? This is a neat question. There's only a single video. There's only a single video where I wrote the video first and then built the project and then designed the project, and that was the Among Us video, because the Among Us video was more sketches. Like, it was almost more sketches than project. But generally, I'll come up with the idea, I'll build the project, trying to record anything remotely interesting, and then I'll write generally I have to start writing the video before the project is fully finished, which makes some fun things happen, like saying something isn't physically possible and then clearly showing on video that it is. But yeah, I generally have an idea of the. I start out with a rough idea of the video, and then I make the project. The important thing to remember is, in the style I don't believe that the process of making projects is fun to watch. I'm not saying it's not interesting. It's just not fun to watch. So the actual making stuff part of my maker videos is only like maybe 30 seconds of a 10-minute long video. So it doesn't actually have a lot of bearing on it. It's kind of fun though. The projects, I do have to come up with projects that appear that work well on camera. I have to come up with projects that work well on camera and that I can actually finish on time, which can be hard. Matthew Dean asks, and this will have to be, I think this will have. I'll take one more question from Hackaday.io. But Matthew asks, how do you recommend focusing only on a project instead of social life and other interests? AKA, how should I dump all my time into one thing? There's no good way to answer this question, because I think that's like, there just isn't enough time for everything. You shouldn't don't throw away your social life, right? But if you are serious about a time-consuming hobby, you're going to have to say no to a lot of social engagements that you would otherwise have gone to. So, like, the best way to split the difference is just to improve saying no. You can totally say, like, you should totally feel comfortable telling a friend, like, yeah, I'd like to go. Like, I normally go out for beers, but I'm really close to like finishing up this RC car, and I really want to tie it off. And if the answer should be like, oh, all right, that's pretty neat. Maybe it's some, like, you will have to make sacrifices. Personally, I don't get lonely. I've only started getting lonely since I've met Brooke. So for me, this I wasn't even aware I was doing this. But is it healthy? No. Is it necessary? Probably no. You do have to be careful. Social stuff tends to monopolize your time, and so do projects. You have to know how much you want to put into each of them, so they don't spiral out of control. And let's see. Somebody has been spamming how to break into a router. If a firewall, if this were my chat, I would ban them. Let's pick a juicy one. Let's pick a tasty one here. This is the final one. What's the most dangerous project you've ever done? Oh my. One of my earliest projects, which I actually put on, you can see this project. It was called the Knockbox. I put this on Instructables. And this was, the idea was you'd knock on your desk and it would, like, turn your lights on and off, right? And I built this thing in the worst possible, like, this thing was so, like, if a screw had been driven in a quarter inch further, it would have created a short on the mains. Like, if I opened this thing up, like, there was no creepage, right? That, like, the lines were so close together that I'm sure an arc formed across solder. Like, I'm sure an arc formed across the traces every time one of these things opened or closed, and eventually that would short out. This thing was a disaster. Like, I didn't realize it at the time, but I was quite literally playing with fire. Unfortunately, that is all the questions that I can take. If you this is still this talk can still go on. If feel free to hang around the hack chat. I need to hit the road, but folks aren't going anywhere. The hack chat forum stays online even between hack chats. Thank you so much to Dan and everyone else at Hackaday for making this possible. If you want to keep rolling, you can come to my Discord. We made partner. Yes, I forgot about this. We made partner. You can just go to discord.com/Zach Friedman, right? And you can get in. It's great. My Patreon, Zach Friedman, everything's Zach Friedman. Instagram, Twitter, it's all Zach Friedman all the way down. I have patrons. They're great. I'm not gonna thank all of them, except for I'm not B2Core. He deserves it. And yes, some of these questions are excellent, and they're the types of things that, frankly, I'm not the one to answer. If you get on our Discord and you tag one of the helpers, they will be more than happy to join in. Anyways, thank you so much to everyone on Hackaday. Thanks to everyone on YouTube. Thanks to all of you folks in the future. It has been great. And thanks to Brooke, of course, the lovely lady to the side of the guy in front of the camera. Yes. Hi, that's Brooke. Take it easy, y'all. See you in the future.